when the business is transitioned from my grandfather to my dad and his uncle, that was exit planning.
Yeah.
Okay, that was triggered by a health event, and it just became the time to make that transfer, and that was exit planning. And they're like, oh, I've never heard of that, and I'm like, you guys already did it.
Yeah,
you already did it.
Yeah, right.
And we have to get ready to do it again.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast with me, your host, Scott Snider, hanging out with actually two very special people today, and I think they're the first business owners that we've had on the show, and more specifically, the first family and next generation business owners. So you guys all know that that's near and dear to my heart with my father, Chris, that owns EPI with me. But I got my two really good friends with me, Rick and Joe. Welcome to the show, my friends. We'll have a good one. Yeah?
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us on, man. I appreciate it.
They're both really nervous, so I think this is going to be a good show. Although you might know Rick from the Exit Planning Summit. He's the drummer in the Smoky Blue Band, right? So if you just attended the summit back in Scottsdale, you might have seen his work on the drums.
Sweating it out in that Arizona sun.
Yeah. And I don't know, I would say, Joe, you've been to a couple owner roundtables, right? Is that true?
I have.
Yeah. So if you're in the Cleveland area and you're a SEPA or you're an advisor supporting a SEPA, I believe Mike Traber does your roundtables. No, is that or Markham, the firm?
Markham, Mike Traber. Yeah. He's been with my family for a while now.
Isn't that a small world? That's a small world.
I had no idea that he was even tied in with you guys until I did meet Scott a few years ago.
Didn't you say that he put a Walking to Destiny book on your dad's desk?
Yeah, and that was I had no idea that was Chris's
my
book.
Dad, yeah. So I think that it'll be interesting because obviously we all hang out, we're all friends, and when we're putting together the show with me and Paige, we're putting together all of our guests and laying out the show. I wanted to circulate in some business owners every few episodes that own companies that a lot of our certified exit planning advisors support. And in particular with these two gentlemen, I honestly think we were hanging out at my house or maybe it was a Gentleman of Craneage outing over at the Hunt Club, right? Yeah. And we could talk about Gentleman of Craneage some other time and we could go down a rabbit hole there. But nonetheless, it's a kind of just a little guys club that we have, and we were talking about business together. And out of our friend group, the three of us are probably some of the only ones that have, I would say, pretty significant businesses with multiple employees that have been long around time. And we were just kind of jiving. And it was at the same time, we had the podcast guest list. And I was like, dude, I got to get these guys on the show. So I'm excited to take some time away from your businesses and get on the show with me. So particularly, I want to talk to you guys today about what it's like to be a next-generation family business owner, how much we know about exit planning and how much we're practicing it. Hopefully, I don't get too embarrassed, right? Because you guys do have a friend that is an owner in the Exit Planning Institute, so hopefully we can move you guys along. But nonetheless, let's just start at the kind of the foundation. Rick, why don't you go first? Why don't you just talk to you about your family business? Tell us about it.
So third generation. My grandfather started he was like a mechanic in the Army. He came back. He became a printer. And then, printing, you're running a print shop. You're getting very mechanical. You get to know all this equipment. He then kind of moved over to buying and selling printing equipment. And then, I always loved my grandfather, kind of a cheap guy, really did not like paying other people to move the stuff he was buying and selling. That was a little cream on the top he wanted for himself. So he said, you know what, screw it. He went and bought his own truck. He bought a forklift, and he started moving his own stuff. And then it slowly kind of transitioned into what we are now today is, a rigging company, a machinery moving company, and trucking. That's kind of how it spiraled out to where we are now.
Well, it's kind of like owning a truck. Once you have the equipment, everybody starts asking you to move.
That's right. You got that pickup, and your buddy's like, "Hey, can you help me move?"
Yep. So that's the best and worst thing I did when I went back to the truck, because then everybody's like, "Hey, man, I got some rock. Can I use your truck today?" And you can pick it up from the bulk supplier.
Exactly. But he took that and turned it into a business, and that's where we are now. So
yeah, I think it's super cool. Both of these gentlemen have what I consider like this very traditional Midwestern multi-generation business that, again, a lot of our certified exit planning advisors represent. We're going to dive more into your kind of ownership situation because you have multiple people in the business. But I want Joe to also introduce his company. So tell us about the come from and what you guys do today.
Yeah, so my grandfather started the business after he finished up his apprenticeship working for a local steel company. And he basically started in the tool and die industry and went out on his own. He figured he had that attitude where he wanted to do it his way. He wanted to try and do it a little bit better, as do
but like
all business owners.
Backyard kind of story that we always hear, right?
Inside of his garage. And similar to Rick's grandfather, he just started getting the equipment and started growing the business from there, making parts and rebuilding. And, the jobs just got bigger and bigger, and he's just kept expanding and expanding. So, how
big is your facility over there now? Because it's huge, like in Cleveland here, because we're all from Cleveland. When you go over to North Ridgeville, which is where his company's at, I think it's always so cool. Because I don't have this. You guys might have this, but I always thought was so cool back in my landscaping days is having your name on the side of the truck and be like, yeah, those are my trucks out there. But when you drive down whatever that is, Sugar Ridge Road.
Yep.
I remember when I first met you and you told me like, oh, cool, like you're a family business owner, and I happened to just be randomly driving down the road, Kalt Manufacturing right there, and I was like, dude, that's pretty sweet. But it's got to be even cool for the family because you're from the garage, and that thing's got to be hundreds of thousands of square feet. It's huge.
Yeah, we're at about 60,000 square feet.
60,000, okay.
Yep.
It's massive.
All under one roof.
So ownership-wise, right, so Grandpa starts it. Dad takes it over. Your dad takes it over. Dad has siblings. They all partake. And what's the next step for you, right? Is it you're taking over? Do you have brothers and sisters involved in the business? What does that look like for you now in the third generation?
I'm the youngest of four. And yeah, the next step is for me to move up and make that transition.
Yeah.
I have my sister that's involved in it. I think at one point, every one of my siblings have had their hand in it a little bit.
Yeah.
I guess I'm the one that's stuck around.
But you've always worked in the business. We were talking about this morning, right? You're like the sweeping the floors when you're 12 years old kind of thing.
Yep. Brought me in on my days off and put me to work.
Yeah.
So
what I thought was interesting at breakfast when we were kind of talking about vacation days and everything and how you guys earn your vacation days, and we could tell stories about that all day, right? But what I thought was interesting to hear you guys talk about, not necessarily the vacation day setup, but you're like, hey, I'm celebrating my 15th year there or my 10th year there. And these dudes are younger than me. So I'm like, 10 years, you had to start there. 15 years, you had to start there when you were like 12. And they're like, yeah, I absolutely did. You have an interesting situation too. So yours is more like me and my dad, right? Like my grandfather didn't start EPI, right? But me and my dad bought EPI, but it's me and my dad transitioning over to me. But you actually have dad, uncle, cousin, and you.
Yeah, so it's the foursome, as they say.
Right. Do you guys play golf?
I'm really the only golfer, I think. Yeah,
fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Which is okay. That's fine. It gives me time to not see them.
Yeah.
But
right.
You got to have your own thing sometimes.
Yes.
So, but yeah. My grandfather started the company, and then my father and my uncle, right out of high school, just kind of got to it, and my cousin and I followed in their footsteps. I think I took 2 weeks off after I graduated high school and just dug in.
Yeah.
Because this industry, it's not something you can learn in a month or two. I mean, when we're trying to train someone, it takes 5 years to be a proficient, safe machine remover. I mean, it really does. It's not something you can go to school and learn and teach. You just got to go do it every day.
Yeah.
So you really need to put the dedication in.
You sparked a question for me. What I also think a lot about your businesses is it is very trade, right? Like there's no way I could walk in, and maybe this is honestly, guys, just me being naive about what we do, and just because it's so natural, because it probably just comes natural for you now. But like, there's no way. I don't know anything about working on a machine, and you could tell me about it all day. You could fix them, you could make stuff, you could create it in your mind and put it on the machine and make it. and I don't know any idea how to move stuff, let alone move stuff safely. I was talking to you at breakfast about hell, we used to dump lawnmowers in my landscaping company into lakes and stuff because we would take a hill too much and go running down the hill and crash it into a creek bed or something. But to your point, it takes years to learn the craft and the trade. How much are your dads or your uncle or the other kind of key people within in your business that have surrounded your dad over the years? How much are they teaching about how to run a business?
It's, you get little snippets.
Yeah.
As I kind of see it. Right now I'm mostly focused on just doing the work.
Okay.
Taking care of our clients.
Mm-hmm.
Taking care of all of our equipment. We have a small fleet of trucks. We got a fleet of forklifts and all this other stuff, all this rigging equipment, chains, and all this. I mean, there's so much you need. One person can't do it all either.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but you're very hands-on,
right? At the
same time, trade of the business.
At the same time, if you have some off time, you can. I handle a lot of the taxes when you have a trucking company. Every state wants $1 if you touch a wheel onto their highway. So
yeah, I guess that's
got to be a lot.
There's a lot. So I try to get my hand in there as well. But it takes a village.
Well, Joe, you were just saying too that you actually got a promotion. Like I've always known you as Joe, the plant manager kind of guy, right? And now when we were talking about the hierarchy of who runs our companies when our dads aren't around, you just were promoted into the vice president's role.
Yeah, so that's kind of recent news that just happened within the past couple of weeks. And now with that happening, my dad and I are kind of working together more as a team.
Yeah.
On the business side of things.
Exactly.
Prior to that, though, even before that plant manager role, when I first started in the shop, there was a little bit of separation between my dad and myself.
Yeah.
I had to report to somebody else who knew the basics
Yeah.
of the trade. That
Yeah.
skilled labor side
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until recently, within the past couple of years, that I started really learning the business side of things from my dad.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting too. Like I've never had that relationship. I think that's interesting. Did you have like a boss? Was your dad your boss when you first you come out of college? You re-enter the business in a more formal way on a career path. Was your dad your direct boss, or did you have a boss?
He wasn't my direct boss.
Yeah.
I mean, he's
twice removed, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But no, I was answering to other guys in the business who have been there for 25, 30 years. We're still there sometimes.
No, I think that's super cool too. Something that I just find your businesses, I can go down multiple rabbit holes, totally like kind of off script here, right? Like I give these guys, for our audience, I give some like talking points, and then typically as we start to talk, we go down different stories. But nonetheless, I do think that was an interesting thing that you guys were talking to me about, where we talk about in family business a lot, the next generation, and if you do have multiple employees, 10 employees, 20, 50, whatever it might be, and you're the new young person in the business and their dad runs the business, do you see that your employees around you see like, oh man, this kid, like let's see what you talked about.
It was,
cutting your teeth with the guys that are 25
right, exactly.
years there.
I started, I was an 18-year-old kid.
Right.
I mean, that's just the reality of it.
We've all been there.
And
Yeah, right.
I had to earn it. I had to go out. I had to go do the work. I had to kind of earn their respect. And now to the point where if they see, we're going to be doing the same job that day, they're like, cool. They know what they're getting. And I like to get the job done just the same as them. So, I kind of get self-fulfillment out of just doing it.
Yeah.
I love the thrill of doing a challenging pick, in front of a bazillion people. A whole machine shop is watching you put together this $1 million machine, and you got to stand, a 40,000 pound piece up and get it landed just within a quarter inch. I mean, I love that.
Seeing that before, that's incredible what you guys do. That's amazing.
That's the best part of my job is tackling that kind of challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like just doing it.
So, but going back to my original question, I want to challenge a little bit here too, right? It's like clearly I understood about half the things that you were talking about. Like you could see he's like sitting on the edge of his chair. Like you get the same way when we're hanging out talking about what you build and design, and you guys clearly understand your craft, your trade. But if I put a profit and loss statement in front of you and told me what is the business doing right now, or if I put a cash flow statement, or I put a personal financial strategy or an estate plan in front of you guys, I think you'd struggle, right? Or no?
Yep.
Yeah, you'd be like, wait a second, let me go back to telling you about that big lift that I just did.
It'd be like, oh, can I talk to you about Snap-on tools instead? Like, can we do that instead?
Well, what about you, Joe? Like, you have this unique thing as certainly a young guy and now certainly a pretty critical role of actually being exposed to some of the stuff that our CPAs teach through these roundtables locally here in Cleveland. So that's had to help kind of further the business side of things.
Yeah, and that's part of being in business in general. You do what you know, and then you surround yourself with the advisors and the right people that can help you, point you and guide you in the right direction, including some of those financial statements.
No, I just think that we talk about this a lot in our space, where it's, we grow up in our family businesses understanding that trade, and then kind of, if you're following any of the stats that we see, kind of all of a sudden, it's time for mom and dad to transition, and they're saying, Joe, Rick, you're up. And I think a lot of time in next generation businesses, they go, well, how the hell do I run the business? So if you think about, and you guys are exposed to this, for me, it's like you come in, you got to care about your customers, right? We got to have a relationship. We want profitable revenue and everything that comes with that. We got to care about our people, which is a little bit different than caring for our customers, right? They want a stable environment. They want a place where we can grow. I think it's the hardest thing, at least in my world, attracting, retaining, and growing great talent, right? There's culture that we are in charge of as owners and business leaders. And then there's like all the systems, like you were talking about, like maintaining your equipment and your trucks. And like we were talking about engineering products and things of that nature. And I just think that a lot of times in my experience in family business, our parents kind of forget that one day, yes, we want to take over the business, but how am I supposed to take over the business when you didn't spend any time really teaching me about the business of the business, right? You guys feel what I'm talking about?
Which, I think Joe and I are here in a sweet spot, like I'm in my early 30s. I know you are.
Yep.
And, personally, I've spent 15 years learning how to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
And, a little earlier this year, it kind of hit me like, I think it's time to maybe devote the next 15 years to, actually running this company that we have, that I have come to love for and care for.
Looking at those statements and
yeah, exactly. And so I find myself in a sweet spot. My father and uncle who own the company now. My dad's in his early 60s. My uncle's very close, and we're at this nice spot where I sat down with everyone and I'm like, we need to start talking about this.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get on top of this. I want to do this. My cousin wants to do this.
Yeah.
And I think together we can step in, and but we have to figure out that plan first.
Right, exactly. We were saying our dads are all about the same age, right?
And
so I know your dad's like an avid hunter, right?
Yeah.
So he likes he's starting to say, this, Joe, it might be your thing a little bit.
He'll find any reason to go out in the woods any time of year. I mean, so
he's kind of dumping it into your lap, like, Joe, like, yeah, you're here.
I wouldn't say dumping it. Okay. I mean, that sounds more like a mess, but organized way of transitioning it to, with the help of like Mike Traper and those kind of guys, the advisors, and what else can we give him? What else can we expose him to? Business side. And as he is then taking smaller and smaller steps back and allowing me to grow into that role.
Well, it's kind of like taking on the trade, right? It's not like, even though when you were 12 sweeping the floor, you didn't necessarily know how to make the part, right?
No.
So you kind of had to learn. Same thing with you. Like, you didn't really know how to drive the big rig or use the forklift. And then you learn that over 15 years. I think that's a good way to describe it, right? Is like in these succession plans, you kind of almost like, okay, the first 15 years I'm going to learn the trade. The next 15 years we're going to transition by me learning the business. And then the milestone at the end of that 15 years of me understanding the customers, the relationships, the people that work with us, the process and the equipment and the culture, that next phase is, okay, now it's time for me to step in. But I do like, Joe, that you're probably one of the only owners that we do talk to that it seems like you have like a relatively active advisory team. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly in talks with them. I mean, again, it's surrounding yourself with the best people, and they help us out a lot.
Well, it's got to be nice for, again, a next generation guy in his young 30s to say, I have my dad, and you probably have some key people that also surrounded your dad along the way that are still there.
Yeah.
And then this outside advisory team, I think that's commendable for you and your dad to kind of open up, because I think it's hard for our dads to say, yeah, it's time for me to step away.
You know, that's quite the opposite of my life, is because, you know, my dad and my uncle, they keep things very close to the chest, as you would say. And, you know, the only advisory they have is maybe from the accountant saying, oh, you should maybe spend your money this way, that way. And that's about as far as they go. And that's kind of one of the things, you know, I would love to change, you know, and one of the things I guess we struggle with is, you know, some of that would call it maybe modernizing your thinking, modernizing your business practice. And, you know, they want to do it their way. And, you know, at some point, you know, maybe we're going to kind of come together and, you know, someone's got to give. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to happen, but
part of that advisory thing is, you know, like insurances and you said accounting. I mean, you know,
sometimes you got to do what the money says.
We have our internal books and numbers and all that stuff, and overall, you know, we help, you know, get guidance in that. But insurance also, that's another.
Well, you guys have to have tons of insurance, right?
Oh boy,
yeah,
oh
liability
boy,
and insurance.
Oh boy,
yeah, right.
Go ahead.
I want to see yours first.
You know what I really love is when a customer calls us and be like, how much is that incidental insurance you have? And you're like, well, you know, it's this. And you're like, you're going to have to double it for this thing we bought that you need to move.
Can you get a rider on that one?
And you're like,
see,
just kind of, it makes you nervous, but, you know, you do the job. That's how it works.
I think it's always so interesting. You guys take me down like memory lane, because I didn't have, when I was young and had my landscaping company, my business was anywhere near the size and complexity as your guys' companies were. But we did have tons of equipment, right? And I could you were talking about stuff breaking or the insurance. And even when you entered a property, they're like, oh, all right, Scott, I was like 17 years old. And they're like, Scott, you need to carry $3 million of insurance. I'm like, oh, boy, I got like $200,000 right now. What's that going to cost me, right? But yeah, I don't have that anymore in my business today, right? Because it's more service and education-based versus heavy equipment-based. I got another question as we kind of talk about dads and transitioning. So both of you are young dads, right? So your daughter, right?
Yeah, she's just under 2.
2.
Yep.
And your son is
4 months.
4 months.
Yeah.
Being new dads.
You look good, Joe, by the way.
That
4 months, 4 months old, you look good.
Thank you. Yeah, he's finally starting to sleep, so am I.
I'm saying, so think about that. And do you think that over the past 4 months or over the past 2 years, as fathers and business owners, has that begun to change your perspective?
Yes.
Yeah.
That is kind of what triggered me to start asking some questions about what happens next.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Do we need an exit plan, or do we need a family business consultant? Like, you know, I said, you know, getting to know you, Scott, kind of got me into the realm of exit planning, and that was not a term that my family had heard of, even though when the business was transitioned from my grandfather to my dad and his uncle, that was exit planning.
Yeah.
Okay, that was triggered by a health event, and it just became the time to make that transfer, and that was exit planning. And they're like, oh, I've never heard of that, and I'm like, you guys already did it.
Yeah,
you already did it.
Yeah, right.
You know, and you know, we have to get ready to do it again.
Yeah, it's getting time to do it again.
It's just where we are.
Yeah.
You know, let's get on top of it.
What about you? You got a 4-month-old. Now you're a
old.
dad, and you got this big business, and you're trying to take it over. What's on your mind, man?
Sustainability. You know, I mean, we've had our doors open for, you know, more than 50 years. And I think everybody understands that third generation owners is, you know, the statistics there.
Yeah.
And it's just about trying to beat that and make the business last another 50, 100, 150 years, or whatever that is. Pass down that legacy to my son or to maybe his children eventually. And, yeah.
It's kind of a shocker, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? It does change your perspective.
It does. It opens up your eyes a lot,
It's probably opened up both of your dad's eyes too when they all started to have kids. They're probably like, oh man, again, they were it's interesting to think, I don't know what the ages they were, that they were in similar spots that you guys sit in today when they were having you and they had this business, right? And I wonder if you haven't had that conversation with your dad, maybe you guys start to have it.
I'd say, I am in a better spot than they were. Okay. My grandfather was kind of the, it's me. I own the place. This is my place. I do how I want. And, the fact that I can have this conversation with my dad and my uncle, like, hey, how do we start working on this? Is cool. They didn't get that.
A lot more relaxed, a little.
Exactly. Because, my dad had, my brother and I at the kind of the same age that I'm starting to have kids. And I mean, back then it was go, 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 go. Where, now earlier we were talking about vacation. It's like now we have the luxury, I can just write, hey, a couple weeks I'm taking a few days off, and that's, we have that now.
Yeah, it's different.
So,
definitely.
I think it's good to have that dialogue at least
100%
with your family,
So I want to dive more into exit planning. You heard both of them start to talk about. I want to get how they feel about exit planning, what it really means. We're going to get to that right after a quick break, so stick with us and we'll be right back.
For business owners, by a business owner. Walking to Destiny is your essential resource for understanding what makes your business highly profitable and significant. It becomes a business owner's handbook to know how to rapidly grow value and ultimately unlock the personal wealth trapped in business. Exit Planning Institute CEO Christopher Snider demonstrates how strategic exit planning will help you achieve improvements today while positioning you to build wealth for generations. Secure your success along other value creators. Discover, prepare, and decide what your walk to destiny will ultimately be. If executed correctly, these strategies can grow a business owner's wealth by 10 times. Walking to Destiny, the second edition, the 11 actions an owner must take to rapidly grow value and unlock wealth. Get your copy today at www.walkingtodestiny.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast. I got to kind of wipe my smile off my face. Hanging out with my friends here is always difficult bringing friends into the studio because they're all cracking jokes. They don't get to see me as much in like this formal business self, right? But maybe Rick more so than ever because he plays plays music at the Summit, so he can kind of see me in
By the way,
form.
Go to the Summit. It's great.
Yeah, thanks for the plug, man. I appreciate it, right?
I don't know what you're doing. If you're not there, figure it out.
Where's next year again?
It's Marco Island, dude.
Marco
you and Didi got to
Island.
come down for sure. See, you'd love that too. You guys are beach people.
Love beaches, man. That's
maybe
a
we'll
great
get
spot.
your dad. Maybe we'll get your dads there, and we could really teach them something about exit planning.
There you
right?
go. There
They'd
you
be
go.
friggin' shocked. But right before the break, Joe, you started talking about, and very naturally talking when I asked you about your kids, you said sustainability. So how are we going? We've been open for over 50 years. How are we going to take the business and maybe give it to the next generation and the next, right?
That's exactly it. And I guess maybe I should back up a little bit on that because that's not what always exit planning is about.
It's true, sure.
So, I mean, it's a matter of what the next step is. And if that's, passing along to the next generation or is that selling?
Yeah, right. Well, that's what I was thinking, right?
Yeah. And so that's what, again, back to the whole advisory thing, we were fortunate enough that, Mike Traber was kind of our business accountant prior to any of this really exit planning becoming a name, like Rick mentioned. And then it kind of evolved from there. Traber took the class, became a SEPA, and started telling my dad, okay, here are your options. Luckily, I was already involved, and so
that's what I'm saying. When you think about the sustainability and 50-year run, and I think it would be very natural for guys like you, right? Third generations. You guys seem like you have a lot of respect for your grandfathers and what they built, a lot of respect for your fathers and their teams and what they built. But what if your dads came to you today and said, I know you guys really want this business, but the best thing for our family right now is to sell it to a third party. Does it piss you off? Does it... Like, how do you take that as a couple of 30-year-old dudes where you're like, dude, I've been working 15 years. I got calloused hands. Like, I'm passionate about this, Dad. What are you talking about? What do you think? Or did it just blow your guys' mind?
Well, I think it would be.
It'd be a tough pill to swallow.
I don't think it's relevant for my situation currently, but I mean, I would imagine that it'd have to be a pretty lucrative deal for
you guys to do that. Take it out of the family.
Yeah, my overall family, my dad, myself, something of that nature.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it'd be a tough pill to swallow also a little bit, you know. If I'm being real here,
it becomes your baby after a while.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like
So we talk about all the time.
You know, we had like a small attempted break-in, and I was just angry. It was like, this is my home.
Stuff.
Yeah.
This is my home.
Yeah.
I come here every day. Like, I was just angry about it. And they didn't even get in. I was still angry about it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it becomes almost a part of you.
Dude, I remember we changed warehouses. So we had a warehouse kind of where I live now in Olmsted Falls. But then we grew and we expanded our landscaping company a little bit south into like Akron, Ohio, right? So like 45 minutes from where we were living. So we moved our warehouse to Brunswick so we could kind of be 50-50, up to Cleveland and down to Akron. And I totally just, again, reminiscent, man. Like we showed up. I couldn't pull the trailers into the shop at this new warehouse. And I had like 4 16 to 18-foot trailers enclosed that would house all of our mowers and all that stuff. And we came in, we would get to the shop, I'd get there like 5:30 in the morning, and all the doors were open on the trailers. And I was like, these freaking guys. Well, I thought first, I was like, these freaking guys left everything open. It was like, it was a Friday. We had to work on Saturday, but they wanted to get out. I remember too, because the day was long and hot. So I was like, maybe they just, why? And then I looked, and the locks were all cut and laying on the ground. So I walked around and looked into the door of the trailer, and it was cleaned out. They even took the spool of weed whacker string. I'm like, come on, it's like 50 cents. Like, come on. But it was in that moment. It's like they took a bit of your family. It's like breaking into my home.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have that kind of passion when you're a business owner like that. That's a very good story.
Yeah, I got angry. I put 8,000 pounds of weights in front of the garage door. They're not getting in again. Not that they got in the first time, but you're really not getting in.
So let's talk about the business in terms of other employees that surround you guys. So we talked about advisors and advisors surrounding us. We talked about our dads and having them educate us, our families educate us. So if you looked out 10 years, our dads are probably in their early to mid 70s. So you're assumingly probably they're taking a little bit more time away and you guys are a little bit more in. What kind of employees surround you guys that can help you grow the business, right? Because everybody, it's cool for you though, because your dad has his brother and your brother has his brother, or your uncle has his brother, your dad. But you in particular, Rick, when we were talking at breakfast, you have some pretty long-term employees that assumingly they're the same age as your dad, so eventually they'll retire. So you're going to have to replace some pretty key people when your legacy comes around.
We're almost there now. I mean, we have one guy who's coming up to 40 years of employment, and you'll almost never be able to replace that.
Right. It's tough.
I mean, and you try to nurture what you can along to newer employees, but that's a rock. That's
knowledge there.
That's
right.
a rock. That's a rock holding up the building.
He's seen some stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you guys got to have the guys like that too, though, that have been around your shop for a long time.
We've got guys anywhere between 25 and the same thing. We've got a guy coming up on 40. He's retiring after his final job this year. Yeah. So yeah.
Have you put any thought about how you again in 10 years? How are we bringing up the next generation of employees as next generation owners? How are we continuing to surround ourselves with people that our dads had for 40 years? I mean, how long has your dad, Joe, been kind of at the helm, do you think, of Kalt? How long do you think he's been the president for?
Yeah,
20 years?
Over 20 years. Yeah.
So that guy that might be celebrating his 40th anniversary has been with your dad alongside him for 20 years.
Yeah, if you ask my dad, he's also been in the company for 40 years too. So
yeah, right. I've been working there since I've been 12. We talk about this 20 years, right?
Yeah. But no, it's a matter of same thing with Rick. You got to start training these guys. It takes 5-10 years. And you got to start ahead of time. You got to start, that forethought is something that you have to have in training the next generation or whoever's going to follow them.
Yeah, I could think like, we don't have like our frontline workers at EPI, I would say are like our member experience team, right? They're working with our customers every day. It's our faculty that's producing SEPA programs, teaching people. It's our operations teams that's putting on the big summit that we have. Where I go when I think about that question myself is my leadership team. So I've had this unbelievable opportunity for the last 3 years, ever since maybe the COVID pandemic and our pivot, where I was able to surround myself with unbelievable executive leaders that I lean on, kind of like an advisory team, to be perfectly honest with you. Even though I'm like the exit planning guy, Joe, if somebody asked me who's your most trusted advisor, I would say Jocelyn, I would say Paige, I would say Josh Koza, Jesse Hudson, Chase. Those would be my dad, right? It wouldn't actually be a professional advisor first. Then I might go value growth consultant, CPA. And so for me, yeah, I just think that it's an interesting question to see, okay, because I'm assuming you guys have growth plans. You have your own kind of thing that you want to do with the business. And who are those key people that we're surrounding ourselves with along that journey? You almost, to your point, have to start grooming them now as you start to transition.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild to think.
And it doesn't get easier.
I wouldn't think so.
It kind of nothing wrong with today's market, but like, people always tend to see the grass is greener on the other side. A lot of my friends who, work in corporate or otherwise, you're like excited to get a new job and, I got a pay bump and I got this promotion and stuff like this. And my whole future life is like, how do I
retain?
Like almost selfishly, like how do I hold on to you? Like you're so great. Like don't leave me. Almost,
right? I totally get it.
It's always a work in progress.
So do you guys have, like, for you, Joe, like you just became the vice president. We talked a little bit about this at breakfast too. Do you guys have defined roles? Like, this is my role, like a job description. So like these are my responsibilities. This is what I do.
Keeping the doors open.
Yeah, that's your response. Yeah, see, that's it.
No, it's it's anything and everything that's involved in the business.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing that I wouldn't ask of an employee that I wouldn't do myself.
Right, exactly. Well, and what's cool about you is that you've been there.
Yeah.
You were sweeping that floor, making that piece, and now you're on the business side. So I think that's in. What about you? Like a formal? Could your dad slide Rick's job description in front of me on a written piece of paper?
It'd be a pretty big piece of paper.
Yeah.
You do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
All of a sudden I got to go work on the security cameras. All of a sudden I got to go fix something. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden we get a phone call. I got to hop in a truck, take someone some equipment. So-and-so truck broke. What do I do? You wear a lot of hats. Oh, the roof is leaking. Let's get up there. Let's figure that one out. The list is almost too numerous to even bother.
Yeah.
But like Joe said, you keep the doors open. Or something
fair.
My family says, you feed the pig, it feeds the family.
So my next question then is, how do you know when you're doing good and how do you know when you're doing bad? Like the performance review. So, and my dad certainly listens to the show, but yeah, the bottom line. That's what me and my dad debate. He used to, when I was younger, give me a annual formal performance review. Like literally written piece of paper. Remember, my dad, though, a little bit unlike your dad's, came out of corporate world, right? So he came with like what I think when I think of like a entrepreneur like Joe, like your grandfather, or Rick, like your grandfather, that just kind of started businesses out of their sheds and garages. They had to put the whole book of how-to together, not just the skill set to make the product or do the service, but the business side as well. But my dad, one of the cool things that he was able to gift to me is this breadth of knowledge from operating in corporate world all the way down to small business, where he learned process, documentation, people management, customer management. and all of that stuff. So my dad actually, in the early days, came with formal performance reviews that he could slide across the desk and say, here's, Scott, some defined opportunities. Here's some defined things I'd like you to work on, and this is how you're performing. I think that's unusual. I think the situation is probably more like your situations where it's like, yo, feed the pig feeds the family, keep the doors open. But how do you know if you're doing good or doing bad?
I mean, there are certain days that you kind of schedule, maybe once per year, every 6 months, as you sit down formally and say, all right, here's what's going on. This is what we're seeing. Let's corral this a little bit. But at the same time, I think maybe it sounds like your shop is the same size, Rick, and as mine, where it's like we're seeing each other every day. We're talking about it. We're seeing the trends firsthand. So communication day in and day out is just kind of evolving and constantly saying, hey, I'm seeing something go this direction. Let's make up a new performance review or guidelines, bumpers, to keep this thing going down the road.
I'd say it's even tougher for us. I mean, the only way you can almost arbitrarily see how well you're doing is how busy is that schedule book.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. If you got a lull for a couple days, that's fine. But like, if you're looking ahead and things are looking pretty scant in there, you got to almost look inward and figure out, what's going on. Have we lost a client? Have we, has something else going on? And otherwise, I mean, in the service world, you just don't know until you get the call.
That's fair.
Yeah. I joke about the bottom line. It's kind of there. It is there.
True.
It's definitely there.
True.
But you got to also look at, like you said, those trends. Okay, sometimes you got the lulls, and do I need to hit the phone calls? Do I need to hit the market?
Am I charging too much? Am I all of a sudden, if I'm charging too little, then we're a little too busy. And you kind of, you're like, all right, maybe, obviously we're the lowest bidder every time now. Let's, So
the way me and my dad have done it now, so I said that my dad used to formally slide the piece of paper across the desk. Now what my dad does is me and Dad have a monthly 3-hour partners meeting. So my dad, again, in a little different space than your dad's. Dad doesn't come into the office every day, and he's in a formal transition, right, that he talks about. And but my performance review, I laugh about it because it is true. In that partners meeting, right, there's like different segments of stuff that we talk about, but it kind of always starts with like a health checkup of the business. And again, Dad being kind of a numbers guy, he says, well, P&L looks good, so do you want to go have a cigar or something? You can always tell in the first 5 minutes, like, are we going to have kind of a tense meeting? Or can we pour a couple of gin and tonics and have this meeting on the porch? But we always do it in Dad's house at the kitchen counter. Our audience has kind of heard me talk about this. But yeah, the performance checkup is, and the way I evolved it, Joe, too, is one, is their top line revenue growth, is their matching bottom line profit growth, and have we retained all of our people? And I think that if you've done all three things, the businesses should be pretty healthy, right? Because I think a lot of the times people get excited about profit or revenue growth, but then their turnover was 50%. So it was at the expense of people, right? Or they have their people and they have tons of revenue, but they charge too little, so their profit actually went down. It didn't go up, right? So those are the three things that we review, and that becomes almost my performance review. And I like it actually a lot more because it's not annual, it's monthly. So I know what my dad thinks.
Yep.
And I have an equity stake in EPI too, which I think is a little different for you guys right now, right? Because you guys are earning your equity into the business. So I'll tell you, when you guys get to that point, if you guys aren't already there, now you can look at Dad and say, okay, now we're literally partners, like your dad and his brother is. That's a new world too for you guys. That we'll have to have another podcast.
Skin in the game.
Well, right? I'm telling you, it becomes a little bit more different. But I would say my dad it certainly gives my dad, it's a lot more respectable of a conversation now because I'm not an employee, I'm not his son. He's like, that's my freaking business partner.
Right.
So, but yeah, I think that really becomes our performance review. Last kind of topic I wanted to talk about and around that is conflict. So say, right, I'm telling you, that's how I laugh about it, because you already know the meeting, if it's going to be a gin and tonic kind of meeting, or is it like Dad's put on a pot of coffee kind of meeting.
Yeah.
But when you do have that informal performance review, How do you handle conflict with your dad? How do you handle a hard conversation?
I think the last pseudo performance review that my dad and I had, we were traveling back from Connecticut from a customer, driving 9 hours, stuck in a car together. So as far as conflict goes, we had to work it out. You know?
But you
There's
talk
no
it out.
conflict. There wasn't any conflict there, but you know,
Yeah.
I mean, you
But
want to leave in that conversation. But you, like you said, I mean, partners. You know,
You got to talk
here's
about
what
it.
we see. Here's how we work through it. Move forward with it, and yeah, it's. I don't think there really is any.
Thing that you can't talk about with your dad. You feel that way?
Yeah.
Because
So
you
it's
spend a
an
lot of
open
your time. You
conversation.
spend a lot of time with your dad outside of your business too.
In and out,
So
in and
yeah.
out.
So you have like you have a dual relationship, business partners, and then friends and father son.
I mean, the only conflict is probably scheduling family vacations. You know.
Yeah. Right.
Having both of us out of the office.
Yeah. Have you both of them out of the office at the same time? What
Yeah.
about you,
No,
man? Like conflict
it's-
with dad.
It's interesting, because there's my dad, there's my uncle.
Right.
They think and work differently.
Right.
One has no problem spending money. The other one doesn't like to spend money. Usually there's a conflict. Honestly, for us, the best way, take a step back, think about it, come back with a better idea. And usually things kind of fit back together the right way.
Do you guys come back though? You don't leave the conversation. Like you'll come, even if it took a week to say, okay, let's digest it and come back. You would say your uncle and dad are pretty good about doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even if things get a little heated, even if, I see someone's face getting a little red, it's, take a step back and come up with a better solution.
Do they involve you in those you and your cousin? So if they don't seem to get along, they're like, hey, let's ask, Rick about this.
The problem with that is, my cousin thinks like my uncle does. They're off the same tree. And then same the other way. I kind of always understand how my dad is thinking.
Yep.
And so it's the same thing. Now at least there's 4 people kind of, knocking it back and forth in your head.
Yeah.
And usually you can come up with something.
Yeah. Fair.
And that's how it works. You gotta meet in the middle somehow.
Yeah.
Compromise is everything.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say one of the best things that my dad has done, and I don't know if you guys feel this in your dads yet, but he's gotten pretty comfortable being uncomfortable, saying like, okay, well, you just got me thinking about this, Joe, when you were like, yeah, you got to compromise. Like I know when I make if me and Dad have a conflict and we're talking about it, and he's coming my way, I'll know that he's like, okay, I don't agree with what's going on here, but let's compromise. Let's go your way. And I think he's done an excellent job over the past couple of years of just kind of letting that flow. But I think it's not easy. I don't think it's easy for our dads at all.
Yeah, it just means you had to overcome some obstacles in the past,
Yeah, that's
that
true.
have clearly gone your way, even though
It's true.
You might not have agreed
You had
with it.
you had to have some wins along the way.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
you got to keep knocking on the door.
So I want to segue into talking about the future. We talked a little bit about what is our legacy going to be, but we're going to talk about that next after a quick break, so stick with us.
The Exit Planning Institute is the authority in exit planning. With its award-winning process, the Value Acceleration methodology provides deep insights into how to help business owners create more significant companies while blending and aligning their business, personal, and financial goals. EPI brings together the world's most elite exit planning advisors to form the EPI community. The EPI community represents over 15,000 professional advisors worldwide, including its 5,000 certified exit planning advisors. These advisors include financial advisors, growth consultants, CPAs, attorneys, M&A advisors, amongst others, who come together to expand their knowledge, create and innovate, network and relationship build, grow their practices, and better attract and engage business owner clients. Join EPI today and gain access to the community, content, courses, credential, and conference that you as the professional advisor need in order to harness the opportunity with small to lower middle market business owners who strive to grow a company of significance, thus having a highly valuable and transferable company. Follow the Exit Planning Institute on LinkedIn and visit earnsepa.com to learn more about the community leading the exit planning profession.
Welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast. Still hanging out with my buddies Rick and Joe. So I wanted to ask these guys about their legacy. I was kind of talking about it pre-show with them, where I think, again, a lot of respect for you guys as businesses, because I do think it's certainly a lot different than ours. Legacy, though, always, I think, is a common thread between family businesses. But for you guys in particular, they always say, right, like to grow from 1,000 to 5,000 is a hell of a lot harder than growing maybe from 0 to 1,000, right? And as you say, we keep seeing the business grow by 10 or 25%. 25% of a $10 million business is a hell of a lot of a bigger number than going from 100 to 125,000, right? So I think about what your grandfathers did and what they built, and now you could drive past the shop and go, Grandpa founded this thing, right? And it went from garage to this 60,000 square foot facility. Or Grandpa founded this thing and it went to this 7 truck operation with our names on the trucks or whatever that is when you're driving down around town. Then your dad and your uncle and your dad and their teams took it from X to Y, right? I think it's a hell of a lot harder in a third generation to say, what's the next thing? What's Rick's legacy? What's Joe's legacy? So for me, guys, to maybe give you some framework, for me, Dad created the value acceleration methodology. I think that's what Dad's known for. That'll be his impact on our industry, right? He created the methodology that we're all loosely talking about on this show today. I think for me, what a nice legacy would be is maybe twofold, kind of jiving with this right off the top of the head. It's always been the big, fat, audacious goal is to see the value acceleration methodology taught inside of classes. So when you went to college, Joe, you went and you learned about what value acceleration was. So you come back and you're even more of a valuable asset to Dad and the team, because you're like, Dad, not only do I understand the trade, but now I understand how to grow this business, both revenue and value, and then how to align our personal and financial plans. Wouldn't that be crazy, right? It would just be a whole new world of talking about business. And I think that's like the big goal. I think my legacy is what I'd like our audience to take when my journey is done, is to say that was a guy that lived by his dad's methodology. So we got to see the methodology created by Chris. Scott and his team took the business from X to Y, but literally did it by living his own methodology and being his own case study. And, to be totally honest, when you think about family business, EPI probably won't transition to a next generation of family business. What I'd probably do in my journey is eventually sell and go do other cool stuff that I'm also passionate about. But I don't have the tie since I've been 10 or 12 or 6 years old, right? I just don't have that in me like you guys do. So everything that we've talked about today, whether it's opening up conversations about transition with Dad, whether it's becoming dads and business owners and business leaders, Rick, what's the future? What's it look like for you? You going from 10 trucks to 20 trucks? Are you going into different industries? What's it look like for you?
I'd like to keep my life manageable.
Okay, that's fair.
And I think I want the company to be the same.
Okay. You feel like you got a good balance today?
I do.
Okay.
And I want to continue servicing our clients. I mean, I love doing the work. I like seeing the work done. And luckily here in Cleveland, we have a large manufacturing base that continues to call us. And I want to be there. I want to answer that phone.
I think that
I want to show up and quote a job and be like, haven't you been here 30 times? Yeah, I've moved everything in here. I know exactly what's going on in here. That's cool. I like that. That's cool. I want to keep that. I want to keep that ship sailing.
It's cool. That's cool. Joe, what about you, man?
I couldn't agree more, honestly.
Really?
I mean, there's potential to grow, but again, manageable. You want to be able to wrap your arms around it a little bit. Yeah. You want to still have that. A lot of our business kind of happens word of mouth because of the quality, and once you start growing that, it's hard to maintain all of it. Having somebody still answer the phone rather than go to a automation of some sort. Yeah. That's what some of our customers have liked about our business. And being able to have that history with certain projects on our customers. It's really neat.
I didn't think you guys were going with that answer, but I want particularly, so for you guys, our audience, I talk about this all the time with our audience, which is primarily advisors. I do a lot of generational research, more like reading and learning, right? That was very generational for you guys to say that, right? So our generation, and we're kind of cuspers, right, between like a Gen X and a millennial. I mean, you guys are a little bit younger than me. But our dads come from a generation of baby boomers that invented the 60-hour work week, and their kind of core value is success. So whether it's certainly in their business or whether it's in their golf game, their hunting game, their religion, their relationship with their wife, they want to feel a sense of being successful within it. But if you look at us, we value time, like how we spend our time. We look naturally for a balance or blend of life. And we value working smarter, not harder. So I just think that was your answers are, I love our business today, but I also love my lifestyle today because I can be a good dad, a good friend, a good business person, and I get to the business at a point where I still feel involved. I thought that's a really cool, very generational, very generational.
Well, I think we talked about it before where, the statistics of the third generation, too, are kind of stacked against us a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
But fortunately, it sounds like we both have opportunities where our grandfathers and their fathers have established a good business that's is transitioning into that exit planning, whether that's...
yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point, though.
Passing along to the next generation or selling it or whatever that might be.
Well, I think it's kind of like what Rick was talking about, too. It sounds like your dad's already using SEPAs, right? So he's already there. And you're starting to have conversations with your dad, cousin, and uncle to say, let's make this more deliberate. You talked about that 15 run to the 15 run. And so I think that's also interesting so that you have maybe a more seamless transition than your dads had with their dads.
I would absolutely love my cousin and I take over. My uncle is very good at bidding and quoting. I would love to see him come 2-3 days a week.
And do what he loves.
Do some quoting, do some bidding. I would love to have my dad come in 2 days a week and, help a little this or, do a little that. I don't want them to go away.
No.
Yeah.
But at the same time, right. At some point, I want a little more, more out of that company.
Yeah.
And so, like I said earlier, I find myself in the sweet spot. I think we're at this perfect time. We're going to start working on this. I want to be proactive about this. I know one of your earlier podcasts, it was like, proactive companies are going to do better.
Oh, certainly.
Than being reactive.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so I want to be on that boat.
Yeah.
I want to find some advisors. I want to change a few little things, but ultimately, kind of like you said earlier, I am also very interested in a balanced life.
Yeah.
I love working. I love what we do. I love helping out running the company as it is, but at the same time, it's important to, be home at 4 or 5 o'clock and be there for the kids.
Yeah.
And be able to go on vacation.
Or play music.
Or be able to do a little this or a little that. I don't need to be rich. I don't need to have millions of dollars in the bank, but if we can go camping on the weekend or something, that's perfect. You need that.
It's cool.
You need that,
it's a cool perspective, man.
You need to feel whole.
I think that, and maybe this is going to sound very millennial of me, right? But if you asked a baby boomer that question, I think their natural tendency is looking for growth because they want to grow, they want to succeed. Or like our grandpas did, right? Or like your dads did. Like, let's take it from garage to huge facility, from one pickup truck to a bunch of massive semi trucks, something like that. But nonetheless, yeah, I think it's a cool answer, guys. I think that's very, and I appreciate
it. It is generational. Like my grandfather grew up on a poor horse farm.
Yeah, and he's like, I got to do something more than this.
And all of a sudden, him being able to afford a boat and a nice house, he kept pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And, nowadays, things have changed a little.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And kind of keeping up with that change, I think, is another thing.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I appreciate you guys coming in, spending some time away from your businesses to work with me on my business and being open in your conversations. I think that one of the struggles we certainly have inside of the advisory community is getting owners together and just opening up. Because I'm saying, like, your problems are probably similar to mine, similar to yours, similar opportunities. We're all of the same age. So if we could just, even though we have wildly different businesses, although I think you guys could probably do some business together, but nonetheless, I think opening up and more is more is pretty cool. So thank you guys very much. Thank you to our listeners. We will be back. You can get all our podcasts and all of your podcast platforms, or check us out at exitisnow.com. Thanks, and we'll see you soon.